Go. Hello, everyone. And so this is the BreakSec podcast and stream. Welcome to everybody who's joining us tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all to our new followers and Stets 10, for instance. Thank you for following.
I was going to say, do we have new followers?
We do. We get new followers every week. I'm glad the audio's even working too, first time out. Thank you for contributing to the first, making sure I don't screw up the audio as per norm.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. So, Oh, okay. I was like, stream looks greasy. I don't know how to go with that. I don't understand.
I just showered.
Yeah, literally just showered. I ran a 4K today, so I'm not schwitzing or smelling like death. So yeah. All right, very cool, very cool. We, in our green room this week, as we're wont to do by having high quality interviews, we have Accidental CISO, who is joining us as portrayed by a snifter of alcohol tonight. So
some brown liquid.
Some brown liquid that may be tea. It could be tea for all we know, just in a fancy glass. Right. So welcome to the show.
Hello. Appreciate you having me on. This is gonna be fun.
Very cool. All right. So I want to talk Miss Berlin a little bit. A couple weeks ago we were on. You were talking about potentially promotion. How's that going for you?
I don't officially have it yet, but I did get some news that I'd like 95%.
Insider trading. Information.
I'll make the announcement like officially later, but yes, it should be in the next month.
I'll call them. Don't make me call them.
I mean, if you want.
I will call. By God, I'll pick up a phone. Is that, people still do that, right?
I think so.
Okay, yeah.
We'll just send them a Zoom link and then they have to show up, I think.
There you go. All right.
It's the rules.
Yeah. It's the rules. Right. So, Mr. Betcher, you're doing okay? Weather's cooperating with y'all right now? And
yeah, it's great. We had tons of rain, but it's drying out.
Yeah, you got our rainstorm about a week ago. We ended up about 3 inches of rain. For those of you on our Slack, I had a backyard pool. At the same time, my pool is being built, so I could just go out there and like belly flop and be like a mud kip or something like that. Yeah, Miss Berlin, Accidental CISO, y'all are.
We would freeze to death.
Oh yeah, I was about to ask. Y'all are in about the same geographical location, so what's the weather been like for y'all in the last couple weeks?
I think we're
gross.
I was gonna say, I think we're far enough apart that they're different, but yeah, it's been real bad.
Oh my
Midwest
goodness.
in general is never great in the winter.
Right.
I'm running the lake, so it froze for a while.
Okay.
Every year we get ice fishermen stuck, and they have to go save them with a helicopter. And
wait. How did they get stuck?
Yeah, that's my
I'm
question.
picturing like grumpy old men.
Yeah,
or whatever, out there ice fishing.
Yeah, just
Did
physics
they
is
lose
hard.
their way?
Physics is hard. No, like it'll be thick enough ice to like take like ice shanties and your four-wheelers and snowmobiles on, and then it gets warmer during like the noon time.
Okay.
And then, lakes move and there's current, they were out on an island of ice and couldn't get back. Every year it happens, and it's the big thing, and they have to send a helicopter out, and then I'm sure these people are very sad when all the equipment sinks to the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I had a friend of mine I used to work with. Not a friend, actually. He lived up in Alaska, and he said the only reason people go to ice fish is because they can get completely blotto, and the fishing is just kind of a nice to have. If you get bored drinking, you can go fish. That was the kind of thing he said. You get bored with the drinking, at least you got something else to do that you can sober up with. But I've never actually gone ice fishing. I moved to San Diego to escape snow. And because I don't like me some snow. So
also, people aren't normally sober when they fish.
Really?
I like fishing, but I've been known to not even bother to bait my hook because the fish actually just complicate things. So it's more just about being out there.
Get the fish if the hook and get it.
Highly recommend getting a charter. I have connections if anybody wants one. It is the best way to fish. You just show up and they have your food for you and your food, and like they bait your hooks and they take the fish off and it's the best.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Super
Very
great.
Nice.
And they even clean your fish for you. They're like, how do you want it?
Yeah, some of them do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did one of those when I was on Diego Garcia. We got like some barracuda and everything. And the island is very insular. So, they'd take like 10% cut and you'd pay like $100. And this was a while ago. But then you'd take it to the one of the restaurants on the island and they would cook it up for you. And they would also take their cut. But it was still like you get hundreds of pounds of fish in a 4-hour time frame in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So, you'd have barracuda and you have tuna and you have bluefin. You'd have all this fish. And I do remember doing that. I do remember getting sick, but I ended up, eating the fish. So it was okay. I just, I don't like ships. So I was in the Navy, but I never spent time on ships. I know, it's a weird thing. Come back for more insights about the Navy and how I didn't spend any time on the ships. Anyway, so I know everybody's here to not hear us talk about fish and weather and stuff. Appreciate everybody who's coming in tonight. Please let people know if you're watching right now that our YouTube channel will have the VOD of this. And we're streaming it right now. We'll have it on LinkedIn. We'll put up a link to LinkedIn and everything so you can join us there as well. But okay, so Accidental CISO. I followed you for years on Twitter. Very insightful posts for the most part. No, I'm just kidding. Very insightful posts. Very insightful posts.
You said something about like high quality interviews and stuff. You set the bar high here for me already. Expecting me to be smart.
It's still January. It's still January. It's fine.
That's right. Be smart this late on a Sunday night is.
We can only go up from here. It's all good. Hey Beta Wolf, about 1% insightful. Oh, that's harsh, the Beta Wolf. I think you're talking about me there, but yeah. So, Accidental CISO, tell us about yourself. I want to ask you about your handle, but you do the Mindful Business podcast, so I want to talk a little bit about that. And so, how did we always start with the origin story. So how did you get your start in information security? I'm assuming it was accidentally?
Sort of. I've always been in the security space, working for small orgs and small businesses and startups, being the only systems administrator many times, or being in orgs that didn't have a dedicated security group. So I would have to fill in for that. But I was working at a security startup that got acquired by a much larger company in the security space and was doing cloud service operations for them. And we got, spun off. So I stayed in the security space for a while. And, following that, went to a healthcare SaaS startup as well. So, that's the place that I ended up accidentally becoming the CISO. I've warned folks, if you take one thing away from this, is if you don't know who the CISO is, never, ever ask who the CISO is, because that just opens the door for somebody to say, oh, that's you, because you actually knew enough to recognize that, hey, somebody needs to be filling this role. And folks that didn't recognize that are going to be like, oh, well, you must be the person that's going to take this and run with it. So, and it's kind of funny because I had actually left the one company before that because I could see the writing on the wall that I was going to end up owning security there, and I didn't want that. And it wasn't long after I arrived at the new place that security managed to find its way back to me again. But interestingly enough, though, it's kind of where I found my place and my people. And as I was going through many of the frustrations of that, I created the Twitter handle to give myself a place to vent anonymously. And it sort of took on a life of its own, but it also, like I said, found my people, found a lot of support, and found that I knew more about what I was doing than I thought I did. And so it was good. That was kind of the origin story of the handle and me finding my place in the community and my career.
Yeah, and that's a great niche, right? Like I think I'm sure you've heard of other people that have found themselves kind of in that
So
situation.
many. I mean, people come out of the woodwork, and like I get so many messages and DMs and stuff of people saying like I accidentally became the CISO too. Like it happens way, way, way more than you would think. And that's kind of become that place that I was at, like completely burned me out and destroyed my mental health and stuff. Like it was awful.
Right.
But when I left that, I still enjoyed helping people and wanted to find ways to help. So that's why I went into consulting, and my consulting practice in a lot of ways is sort of like a CISO whisperer now, or a CISO coach almost, with the advisory services that I do. I don't get named as the security officer, but I want to help other people who have found themselves owning securities, other accidental CISOs. They found themselves owning security, aren't sure exactly what to do, but they want to own it. They're up to the challenge, and they just need a little bit of help with the strategy and roadmap and prioritization and execution.
Very nice.
A lot of times just where to start.
What size org is like a CISO needed? I mean, maybe you have a 20-person company and you really don't need security, or do you?
You need somebody who's accountable for it. But when you get into those smaller orgs, having somebody maybe outsourcing some of that expertise, working with a managed service provider or managed security service provider or something can help. It varies by organization and what they're doing. Because if you're a security company, you're going to need somebody in that role much earlier. Or maybe if you're in a SaaS company in a regulated space like healthcare, you may need somebody in that head of security role much earlier. But a lot of times I think it really just comes down to the point where owning the security program is more than somebody can do with a partial mind share. Like that, it can't be an also owned sort of thing. And I don't know, it a lot of orgs, it still ends up being the CIO or whoever's owning IT up even into hundreds of people sometimes before they have a outright CISO role. And a lot of times the CISO role will end up being a manager or a director level or something. That's also a little challenging because it's down a little bit low in the org to have a global mandate for security across an entire organization at that point. But yeah, it's so difficult to say because it's going to be different for every org and every industry, and depends so much on what they're doing and what their customers are, what the business drivers are for security.
Very nice. I've seen several blog posts, and one of the reasons that I've been trying to get involved with the local tech community here in the San Diego area, they have a lot of startups down here. Surprisingly, it's not as not Silicon Valley sized, but there's 10, 20, 30 different companies down here trying to build things up. And a lot of blog posts I've seen is like, who are the first 10 people you should hire? And the first 10 people you should hire are not security people. Actually, a lot of them is like, well, if you absolutely need somebody, compliance is going to be the first person that you need, because at some point somebody's going to be like, hey, do you follow FISMA, or hey, do you follow HIPAA, or hey, do you follow some kind of compliance requirement, and this is like, you need them right when you're going to hit that first big contract. It's like, okay, here's $100 million contract, and they're like, oh, are we compliant with this? Well, I don't know. We need a GRC
you have a
person.
Privacy officer.
Right. Do you have a privacy person? So yeah, GRC was like the first usually that comes up as like, in the security-esque realm that come up, but a dedicated security person was like ways down. It's interesting that you ended up, did you find that it was more security on the GRC side, or was more like strict security, like, you need to secure the clouds and all these things?
So I've come up through a technical background, IT, network systems support, DevOps, cloud, SaaS operations, all that stuff, and worked my way over into leadership, through my business degree coursework, and that kind of stuff kind of helped me a little bit there. But yeah, I have done kind of across the board. These days, I don't get hands-on with my clients' technology. That's one of the, like, in my contracts, my statements of work specifically, I say that's out of scope. explicitly in every one that I do, because whoever touched it last owns it. And I will be happy to guide them through setting, firewall rules or whatever they need to do, or set up a VPN or but I'm not gonna touch it. But I'm a huge proponent of outsourcing, because these small orgs, like you mentioned, a 10-person org, they don't need a full-time person, but maybe whoever is kind of in that COO role may be taking on compliance, or maybe possibly the CFO, or whoever is kind of overseeing legal or something may. But that's exactly the space that I plan to help them, on a couple hours a week here and there, just to kind of guide them through that stuff and understand what are we agreeing to. And it's always fun when it's the contract's already signed and they're trying to figure out, do we comply and how do we get compliant with this contract we just signed. But with small companies, that also happens a lot, and you gotta go chase the stuff and figure out how to do it later, I guess.
Yeah that makes a lot of sense. So we'll talk about the podcast at the end, because I definitely want to make sure that we let people who are BreakSec friends know about your podcast and what have you. So one of our topics was that came up was discussing your experiences when you were a new leader. So we've got some new leaders here. Mr. Betcher, of course, is in a senior leadership role. My job may be moving me into a manager of people role eventually in the next few months here with this reorg that I've mentioned to Mr. Betcher and Ms. Berlin.
And then same for me.
Yeah.
I'll take all the advice I can get.
Yeah. So we'll start with C, which is Ms. Berlin's question. What's a good piece of advice you've been given or that you impart to others that relates to leadership?
Oh man. I think really it's a lot of it comes down to the difference between the boss and the leader. And there's that meme of, the boss is sitting behind the desk pointing, saying go to his direct reports or whatever. And then the frame under it is the leader who's out in front of them, pointing ahead of them all, saying, let's go. And like, that really is the biggest thing that I can say to folks who are becoming new managers, is being a manager and being a leader, two different things. And, a lot of times they come in the same role, but being a leader is about, being there with your team and supporting them and fighting them. And that's, one of the things that I've always just been a very grassroots leader, like in the trenches with my teams. Maybe that's partially because of my technical background as well, that I've been able to do that. But I think that's really the biggest one, is being able to make that distinction between being a boss and a leader, and being the person that takes care of the team and looks out for them and their well-being. Because so many of us in security, especially, like, we don't know our limits very well, and we tend to push past them pretty easily. And a lot of times we need the opposite of what Management 101 might teach you about trying to manage and motivate people. A lot of us need pulled back sometimes.
Right.
And I've seen, and I know people talk about this all the time, and I've seen it a whole bunch in my career, but how many times the most senior person that's been there the longest is the one that's promoted to a leadership position, right? When that's not necessarily something that they want or something that they're good at. Like, they may be great technically, but they are not good leaders. And I love the whole leader versus boss thing, because I've always been nervous about like, I've always been a natural born leader, because I enjoy doing stuff like that. But I think if you look at it from I'm going to be a leader perspective and not I'm going to be a boss perspective, I think it usually goes so much better. So I've been collecting those pieces of advice like Pokemon.
Nice.
The best one that I've gotten so far is when I first started doing even like part-time leadership stuff at work. I met with Ian Meyer, and because he had done like huge teams at Marriott and like just had been leading teams for forever. And the one piece of advice I remember writing down was make sure your team knows that there's a certain expectation of failure, not because you think they're terrible and that they're going to fail, but because if there's always just a certain expectation that you can be a human, that it's not a big deal when you do fail.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So one question I've got is you said you sometimes like to be in the trenches with folks. Have you ever found yourself, have you ever been told, hey, you're supposed to stay up here because you're going to help be that shit filter between upper management and these folks? If you're down here with them, you can't play both sides of the aisle, so to speak. You're either a manager or you're a doer. You can't be a manager doer. Have you ever had any discussions about that?
Yes, but I've had the absolute opposite a discussion of that. I have in multiple companies actually where I have tried to create that separation to be able to focus on, stay above the weeds so that I can focus on strategy and supporting and enabling the team and pull my feet out of the day-to-day technical stuff. And because leadership knew that I was capable of that, continued to try to push me back down. And I've had in multiple orgs been told almost verbatim in both places, quote, we can't afford to have a manager who just manages and doesn't do. And so you have to do both. And so it's forced me to have to be able to pivot back and forth a lot, which now in my consulting is actually good because I've gotten used to that pivoting. But in my consulting, I'm able to control and set boundaries a little better than when I was an employee. But that ability to do the strategy and the higher level business level thinking and consulting, and then flip to help with execution and dive in and roll up my sleeves is kind of a superpower there. But it was very frustrating working in those orgs and constantly being pushed down when actually what I needed was to be able to have them help pull me up so that I could focus on enabling the teams, because we were at a point with scaling the teams where that's what I needed to do. And I ended up too often in the weeds, still trying to do firefighting and that kind of stuff. And it didn't let us be as successful as we could have if I hadn't had other, dare I say, poor leadership continually shoving me back down because they didn't want to backfill me in the process.
Right. Yeah. See, it's been my experience that me as the shit filter, I'm the one organizing and communicating between those folks. And to be honest, I've left the technical world a long time ago, so I'm not going to be popping shells. My job is to, I'm a people person, damn it. So I'm talking with the product teams, and I'm talking with senior leadership and security management, which is a full-time enough job for me. And me trying to get in there, and my laptop was complete shite at work, but trying to get those things set up and getting an environment set up and all that stuff, it would actually be a detriment to my team by doing that. So, I say we define our roles, and I like, hey, what do you need me to do? That kind of thing. And it actually comes from both sides. It's, hey, management, what do you need me to do, or what do you want to see out of this? And then for my team, and like you said, be a leader is, I tend to carry the water. So I try to keep the filter, I try to get things out of their way. If they need access to code, I'm the guy on chat going, hey, product team, I need this now. I need this 5 minutes ago. We're doing X. You need to tell me, how to get access to these things, or finding them points of contact or something. So sometimes some people see that as like, being the water boy or something, but they can't do their job if they have barriers or obstacles to that. And so for me, it's been, I try to be the effective communicator that they may not have time to do, or hold meetings and manage those things. So I guess it just comes down to management styles. So my question in there was, are you emulating what you learned at other orgs? And it sounds like you've done some of that, but it's like you kind of have to build your own leadership style. So are you just taking a little bit from column A and column B and just kind of melding them together?
I've done a lot of reading over the years, partially through my, my business coursework, some stuff on the side. Pay attention to what folks talk about leadership on Twitter and social media and that kind of stuff as well, quite a bit.
Right.
So that's been a great source of learning. And I've pulled, from my experience, some of it, emulating what has worked and what to do, and some of it taking those lessons and saying, okay, that's what not to do, and just knowing like I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the opposite of that. So that's one of the big things. But I like your comment about the water boy, because that's one of the things about me and my leadership style is like I never feel like I'm above anybody else.
Right.
Like our roles may be different, but like I'm not like just because I'm a manager or a level or two or whatever up from somebody. I mean, I'm better than them. We're
Right.
equal as humans. We're just there to all work together as a team, and we've got different roles. But also, like I've never been not willing to do whatever needed done. Whether that's sweeping the floors and taking out the trash, on deployment nights,
Right.
so that the rest of the team can stay focused on what they're doing or whatever. Like there's literally nothing that I feel is beneath me. And that's one of the things that, I hope that my team sees, because I want them as well to, be willing to help and do things as well when other folks need their support. Because a lot of times we end up in support kind of roles in IT and infrastructure and security.
Right.
Well,
Right.
just look at the word leader. I mean, what does that actually mean? It means someone who leads, right? And what does that mean? Well, you're the point of the spear, right? So if you have some job to do, you're the first one there. You're removing roadblocks, as Amanda said. You're making it easier for the rest of the team to do their job, right? And when I have a one-on-one with a manager and they pile on a week's worth of work during that meeting on me, that's not removing roadblocks. I need to come out of a one-on-one and my job just got a little bit easier, right? Because they're a step above me and they're able to have those tough conversations with their peers to say, hey, my guy needs this, right? In order to get that important task done. Right? And so that's what a true leader can do for the team is be that person who removes those blockers.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And when things go well, gives the credit to the team. That's the other thing that, your team needs to see is like they get credit for the good stuff and you own the bad stuff. And,
Right.
That's part of the shit filter as well, is because then when stuff goes bad, you own it. So it doesn't have to come all the way downhill to them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
You take
accountability goes
responsibility.
a long way.
Mm-hmm.
You make sure that the excrement doesn't go any further than you, right?
Yeah. When you can.
Excrement. I forgot Mr. Betcher is the adult here. I just say shit filter, but yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. So let me see so do you have any stories about what didn't work? What, obviously being a manager at various different organizations, if you're doing, it sounds like you're doing some virtual CISO stuff. So it feels like every time you go to a different customer, you have to approach them differently. So what works at company XYZ won't work at ABC. So do you have examples of, hey, I come into this new company and your relation building, your trust building, because there's no trust right now. So, you're new and whatever. So have you had any examples of where you interacted with a team and it didn't work out? And what did you learn from that?
I mean, I recently, just within the last few months, came into a new client through one of my channel partners. So this is one of their clients that they were bringing me in to do some advisory work and help them build their program, get ready for SOC 2. There's a bunch of stuff that's ongoing with this client, but the first technical session with the client, the channel partner and I, as we were asking questions, they're technically about the security of the platform, just trying to understand it. Their like architect role ended up feeling attacked in the process. And so like there was some smoothing over that we've had to do following that, and being conscious about, giving kudos and those types of things. And because this was normally I lead with an assessment when I come into a client. And so when I'm getting ready to do an assessment, I always, at the beginning of every workshop with new folks, will sort of give a little talk about, transparency. And this is an internal exercise. This is not to get anybody, this is not to get anybody in trouble. I always ask the leadership as well to set that expectation that we're doing this to understand where we are today, and we need to be honest with ourselves looking in the mirror. And I didn't have that opportunity with this particular client because I wasn't leading with an assessment, and we were kind of jumping in the middle. So for me, that taught me that we need to back up a little bit, and I need to start where I normally start rather than jumping into the middle of things just because a client wants to move a little bit faster.
Nice. Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, it's good that you're kind of, putting them all on the same level to start out, and there may be some organizations, I'd imagine, that don't want to look in that mirror because it is truly an ugly image. Maybe your delivery is to not, judge. It's kind of like, okay, been there, seen that, and maybe you exude confidence. You're like, okay, yeah, we can work with this. It's okay to not have X. It's okay to not have Y. You probably should have passwords on that. You got, I'm just using examples there, but I'm sure that by the time you've done enough of these that it's like, okay, there's nothing new that I haven't seen in this space, because things like healthcare is already hot garbage on the best of days. But so yeah, I guess having confidence is a good general idea coming in, or to a point.
Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, kind of in healthcare, they talk about bedside manner. Keeping the patient calm, and there is that component there. But there's also, as I'm going through assessments as well, where asking questions and they're like, man, they just don't have good answers for it. But I'll ask them a different, additional questions around maybe compensating controls and other things where, at first, somebody on their team's like, we're not doing that at all. We should be, but we're not. And maybe I'll ask them a couple more questions and realize, well, maybe they're not doing that one thing, but they're doing a couple other things that help make it not so bad. So I try to make sure that I give them the kudos that they deserve. And when I write a report up, I make sure that I include like what's going well. What is this organization doing well before I start hitting them with the bad stuff. And I transition from that and talk about like, broad strokes areas for improvement before we get into the detailed recommendations. But I feel like talking about what they do well and giving them those kudos also really helps, because then they understand that like I'm not there to beat them up. But also there's a lot of times when I talk to them like, oh, yeah, we've been trying to get them to agree to do that for a long time. And I make notes of that stuff because I want to make sure if there's stuff that they've been pushing on that hasn't been done, if it's appropriate, I want to make sure that I'm framing things in a way that's not going to conflict with what they've already been trying to advocate within the organization. So that's another big piece of, as I talk with the technical folks, is just keeping them calm and realize I'm not there to get them. I'm there to help them, because I know there's always things that they've wanted to do that they haven't been able to do. And there's things that maybe they're doing that make not doing some of these things so bad. And the fact that I'm bringing that up and asking them questions and trying to make sure we at least document the stuff that they are doing that's good, it tends to get them in a more relaxed state. And I'm able to then have a more transparent conversation with them. And leadership is then, that brought me in, is able to get a report and better information and recommendations, because folks weren't trying to hide stuff. They weren't trying to get in, were they going to get in trouble. It's just really, really important to come in and not, be a jerk and be judgmental about this kind of stuff, because you're going to get a lot better results.
Yeah. Yep. I'd imagine they were already a little skittish about bringing somebody new in and, telling them all their intimate little secrets and, where the skeletons are buried. And there's definitely a trust issue. When I used to do assessments for hospital and healthcare systems, in a 2-week engagement, talking to management about things, it took a good day and a half to get them to understand I'm not there to be the auditor. I'm there to be pre-audit and to help you identify any trouble places that you might have, any places you're going really well, and then the trouble places. But yeah, it's hard to generate that kind of trust.
And having buried some bodies, before myself, I've been in IT and security and stuff. I've dealt with technical debt. I've dealt with all this stuff. I've been the guy that's been running the infrastructure and systems for most of my career. So also I know where to poke when, I can tell by the way they're describing something that they're trying to gloss over something and hope that I'll take it at face value. And, with SaaS applications or, one of the areas a lot of times is SSL termination, at a load balancer, but maybe not between application components behind the scenes and that sort of thing. Like there's just little places where you can look at that or key management. Like, okay, great. You got all these strong keys, you got TLS, all this stuff, or strong passwords, you got MFA, how do you manage those keys?
Right.
Just like crap.
Yep.
They went there. Yeah. And so
you mean it's not just a checkbox?
Yeah.
You mean I have to answer real questions on how?
Yeah. Right. And usually there's one technical person on the call that's always just like, I've been saying we need to do this for 5 years or however long they've been there and they've gotten no traction on it and that sort of thing. It's always amusing.
Now, the people that you've seen like bring a service like yours in, how do you think they were convinced to make that happen? And there's kind of a question in our stream chat about just like how do you convince them that IT and security strategy is important and it needs to be more than, the handful of people that are trying to do it internally, but they need somebody either full-time or virtual or consulting or whatever do a CISO level role. Like how did somebody internally even start that conversation?
I don't convince people that this stuff is important. And like that's a kind of a very privileged thing to say. There are so many, because I'm going after small businesses, there are so many small businesses out there that there's enough of them that already get it and they know they need help, like to help them and not have to convince people that it's important. And that's part of why I focus on relationships so much with like IT managed service providers and other cyber companies for referrals and stuff back and forth and partner with them instead of just trying to find customers directly, because they've already, the ITMSP or maybe a pen testing company or something, they've already had conversations with this client and the client recognizes they need help either because of the pen test or because of other stuff that they're going through with the ITMSP. And those groups say, all right, we know somebody you should talk to. And at that point, then it comes down to confidence. Like I think maybe Brian was saying earlier, it's more about giving them the confidence that this isn't a big deal. We know exactly what we need to do. This is what it's going to take. This is how long it'll take. This is what it'll cost. Not a huge problem. Like this is not scary, and we got this. And you give them that confidence, and like that ends up being the big thing. But I try not to get into convincing people that it's important just to try and sell stuff, because that's a waste of time and energy. But the ones that I do end up working with, there's a few different drivers for it. It could be just legal and regulatory stuff like HIPAA in the healthcare startup space. It can be customers demanding that they get SOC 2 or they have contractual obligations with customers that are making them uneasy. And they're like, okay, we got to make sure that we are compliant with this. Sometimes in the smaller orgs too, it's insurance costs are going up. The insurance questionnaires are getting harder. They're being asked questions by their insurance carrier that they don't have good answers to, and their rates are going up, or they're not able to get enough coverage. And maybe they get a contract that says they need 10 million in coverage, and their carrier will only give them 5, and now they got to go find a second carrier or some way to aggregate to get what they need. And they're realizing, okay, we need to step up our game and lower the risk. And sometimes there's been a prior breach, as well. But like those tend to be the big things. It's legal, regulatory, it's customer demand, or it's, insurance requirements are getting harder. And they've already decided that we need to do something, and they're just not sure what at that point.
Right.
Yeah, the example that they listed were things like, especially like when companies' main business is something like bricklaying or plumbers, or something where maybe they don't realize that security is a thing.
Yep. And the privacy legislation, privacy is going to be a huge driver of this. We've already got several states with privacy mandates. And when we have one nationally for customers or for companies to be able to actually comply, because every company that has customers is going to have private information. They're going to have that contact information and stuff for their customers, and the potentially financial information for payment processing and that kind of stuff too. And this legislation is going to drive a lot of that when it happens nationally, but it's already starting to drive that sort of improvement in the states where it is, California and New York and Pennsylvania, et cetera.
Very nice. So you go in and you consult with folks that are doing all kinds of stuff, not just necessarily SaaS products. Do they actually make like real physical products?
Nobody right now is physical. As I'm thinking through clients, everybody I'm working with right now is SaaS based. I have in the past worked with a client that was doing medical device manufacturing, and we were building up their security program there. But yeah, nothing current. Everything's SaaS. A lot of SaaS startup stuff.
Right.
Because that's one of those places where that SOC 2 driver ends up being a big one. A lot of it is the security requirements around SOC 2, and then some of the clients that I've got, multiple clients I've got, are in the healthcare space. So they're dealing with HIPAA and customers demanding SOC 2, and one's doing high trust right now.
Right. Okay. So let's get some definitions down here. There is a site that I looked at. The one of the best infographics I've ever seen is the infrastructure as a service or whatever, went from a pizza point of view. So trying to bring up what PaaS is and IaaS, and this is a blog post for somebody. I'm posting it into the chat, YouTube and Discord. Oh wait, let me add it to Doink. There we go. It's in the Zoom chat as well. They said that the one that first made its rounds in the meme world was incorrect, and I don't know if you want to comment on that as well, but they were talking about the things that were vendor owned versus things that you own. So in this case, software as a service or SaaS is basically cheese toppings, pizza dough, fire, oven, gas, drinks, dining tables, like going to Pizza Hut, and platform as a service is you provide the table and the drinks, and everything else is provided by the vendor. Infrastructure as a service, it's like Papa Murphy's here in the U.S. You take and bake, so they do all of the stuff. You take it home, put it in your oven, and you cook it. And then the traditional is you make the dough, you make the sauce, you do all that stuff. You do all the stuff to make your own pizza, whether or not it turns out good or I don't know. But so, are you working with in the traditional sense of a SaaS, or is there anything that's mixed, or is there any like platform related items? Because my next question is, what are some of the things that you've come up against, in terms of SaaS platforms that are, it's kind of, systemic issues. It's like everybody has the same problem. Everybody's got auth issues or whatever. So, we'll take the first question and then we can move to the second question.
Everybody at this point that I'm working with is doing software as a service, with the exception of one who is sort of a platform as a service. And, they're selling tools that folks in, healthcare space, one of them's in the security space, are using. And it's just, pure, it's a, web app, and they're using the web app in their browser, and whatever they need to do. The one that is a sort of a platform as a service is largely API based. So they're doing integrations with their customers and kind of end up being an intermediary with third-party companies as well. So so they end up a little more of as a platform as a service in there. And as you come back to infrastructure as a service, being on the inside of those organizations, though, when they're building a SaaS platform that's SaaS to their customers, they're often using these cloud providers, whether it's AWS or Google or Azure, as an infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. And usually it's a mix of those. And I've even gone as far as to refer to infrastructure as a service with like Amazon as being on-prem before, because you own so much of the stack. Like you're still defining the network, and you're still building out virtual machines and other things in that, depending on how you're using it, to the point where whether it's in your computer room on a VMware box or whether it's in Amazon, it's, 6 of one, half a dozen the other from an operational standpoint. So it doesn't abstract away everything at the infrastructure as a service layer. And that's one of the areas that I see SaaS startups struggle with, especially young ones, as their customers are asking them security questions, and they confuse what the platform gives them versus what they have to own in the process. And, the worst cases, those are the stereotypical ones where the startup, gets asked for their SOC 2 report and they give them Amazon's, SOC 2 report.
That's a no-no, by the way. Yeah.
I've had one client try to do that, and I've had to explain, no, that's not what they're looking for here.
Yeah. Plus, you don't give Amazon's SOC 2 report. That requires an NDA between you and Amazon, which you're not supposed to share. It's a SOC 3 that you're supposed to give them for Amazon. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a little thing I learned when I worked at CrowdStrike. We had customers who were like, "Yeah, we want to go see the data center," and I was like, "Which data center?" "Oh, the one at Amazon." And I was like, "Yeah, great. When are we going to go?" And they're like, "No, you need to." So yeah, it got into the whole thing. It's like, no, you don't go see the data center. Yeah. So it was pretty funny, and this was in 2017, even when people were trying to figure out the cloud. And let's go see the data center. We want to make sure it's secure. I'm like, it's secure. It's Amazon. Okay. So yeah, they,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. But yeah, cool. So you talked about integrators, which is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know why I put it down, but it's one that, I put it in here because I was like, oh, you were talking about integrations, and the next question that I thought of, because I was doing this, was we're over integrated. I think you have integrators who integrate to integrators who also integrate to things, and the thing that I've seen a lot of is you'll have a site which isn't your site, but for bug bounty purposes, it is your site. And then you have to go talk to that third-party vendor because their site is messed up, whether it be something like an Etsy store front end, or you've got a survey on your website which is really an iframe that goes to like fucking Marketo or something like that. There's cross-site scripting in the Marketo form because it may or may not actually be the case anymore. But then you've got to go talk to Marketo and go, hey, your shit's broke, fix it. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get to it when we can. The relationship there with third parties and integrators and stuff seems to be a bit loosey-goosey in many cases. What's been your experience with working with not just these people, but the downstream stuff, or where it's like, oh, we don't control this, we have to go talk to them? and maybe that relationship's not so nice. Maybe it's like there is no contract relationship there, or you have to reestablish that. What does that look like for when you run into stuff like that?
Yeah, I've primarily run into this in the healthcare SaaS space. When you're trying to integrate a SaaS SaaS platform with the healthcare electronic health record systems, things like that, and the types of data that you have, and the fact that healthcare ends up with a lot of legacy stuff, and so you may end up with needing to integrate something that has an old school RS-232 serial port with the system all the way up to something that's using new protocols like FHIR or HL7, and potentially anything in between, and needing those translation layers for some of those things can be really tricky. Similar for integrating with like pager networks, because pagers are still this legacy technology, but they're still used in healthcare because they're using frequency bands that actually will penetrate the buildings with all their shielding and stuff that they build hospitals to be shielded from, x-rays and right. all that kind of stuff. And I mean, so pagers are still heavily used because they work. Right. But being able to have these things integrate with all of these systems, the different identity providers in the process is another huge one in healthcare, because every healthcare, at least enterprise healthcare customer, they've generally got their own identity provider that they need to be able to use for a single sign-on and all of that kind of stuff. And it does, when you support those things, like, it does make it a lot easier to make that sale when you go and tell the healthcare provider, yep, you get to control all of your group memberships and all of your user provisioning and all of that stuff on your side, and you integrate your IDP, you can do all of the conditional access and MFA and everything else that you could possibly want because of those types of integrations. But it becomes very difficult, especially from an onboarding standpoint, like onboarding those new clients and going through that implementation phase when you have to integrate all of these different things, right. Especially when you also have to run VPNs from the customer's on-prem network into your SaaS environment, because they won't connect directly over the public internet to get to you or something. Like, there have been so many different like hoops that you got to jump through and weird gyrations in healthcare SaaS to handle all of these types of integrations that end up just so necessary to make it work, because of just the weird, kind of like you said, the disaster that is healthcare IT right now.
Yeah, we had an entire integrations analyst team when I worked at the hospital. There are 4 people that all they did was write and support integrations between software.
Yep.
So they're writing like middleware, or did they have like translations between from SOAP to REST or something like that?
Yeah. And most things didn't have APIs, so it was just like pulling flat files and transferring them, or real bad.
Gross.
Yeah. There's some SaaS services or cloud services that do this, and I'm blanking on the name of the one that's so common in healthcare that does this, that folks generally run internally, but it's a beast of a system to administer, and that's why they end up with 4-person teams trying to administer these tools.
Right.
It's been a long time for me. I can't even remember the name. Well, I'm sure I could find it.
Yeah. So do you always come in, do you always, based on the tech stack, so when they explain the tech stack to you, you go, okay, you're probably not doing logging, probably have poor password requirements, you're probably missing certain integrations with blah. And do you ever get those kinds of things where they look at you and they go, how do you know that? And you're like, well, I've seen it already. You're not doing anything that hasn't already been done before. You're still running a lot of legacy garbage because you have to, because you're a hospital. Do you ever run into things like that where they think you're a freaking fortune teller to start out with?
Yeah, I stepped through, and we, kind of go through the structured set of questions through the uh, assessment process. And kind of an example of that, if we get to asking about logging, do they have logs aggregated into a central repository? And if they don't, like, you pretty much know right then and there that logging's a mess, monitoring's a mess, alerting's a mess, observability in general is probably non-existent at that point. But it also tells me that troubleshooting and that sort of thing is going to be also difficult. If they're doing DevOps and stuff, people are probably reaching their hands into servers regularly because they can't even get to logs in a central place without tooling. That there's probably other tooling that's also missing. So it does help, kind of know, where to go in the process of going through the assessment. But generally, I'm sticking to frameworks like, SOC 2 or NIST CSF or something like that, or maybe a composite framework where they've got a couple of different things that we need to blend into a master framework to make sure we're covering all of them. And, just stepping through that tends to bring out a lot of uncomfortable questions for the clients. No matter how good their program is, there's always something uncomfortable in there.
Yeah, cool. Let me go and look through here. So you've built SaaS products or managed SaaS products. Let's say there's somebody out there, maybe somebody watching right now that's got a SaaS product or is about to start building one. What are some of the things that they should potentially think about when they're designing a SaaS product or having to, I don't know, maybe upgrade one? What would be a cheap win or something that doesn't take a lot of lift here?
The CI/CD pipeline, build that first before you start writing a bunch of code for the product. Figure out where what's your architecture going to look like and what you're going to need to deploy it. It doesn't have to be a complex CI/CD pipeline, but just getting it so that you're deploying things through automation as early on as possible is one of the huge things that I see, because folks start building it out manually, and doing this stuff manually doesn't scale very well. And, every deployment ends up being a crapshoot of whether or not production is going to match the test environments, and things can go sideways in production deployments and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think, getting at least a foundational CI/CD pipeline built before starting to build a bunch of SaaS stuff on top of it is something that a lot of orgs don't, because they get in a hurry and they want to see their proof of concept application go, that minimum viable product. But that's a one that is a mistake that gets made a lot. Another mistake I see a lot too is the organization focuses on the customer facing features, and they ignore the fact that the folks who have to operate the service are also stakeholders and customers, and they fail to build the interfaces and the tools that the operations people are going to need to run it. And so, the way this ends up coming out is, there's no admin UI to flip some toggle on somebody's account. So people, somebody's got to go in and actually be manually running database scripts to enable or disable features or to change settings, because there's just no way to do it. And that makes it incredibly difficult as well to operate a SaaS product and start to scale. And it that and the CI/CD pipeline together adds a huge inefficiency on the ops side, that you end up with your dev team, DevOps, group just wasting a colossal amount of time, that if you just front load that little bit of effort, because it compounds, and the longer you kick that can down the road, the more difficult it gets to build that stuff in. And I think the other biggest mistake, other than building in support for MFA and role-based access and stuff like early on, because customers are going to be asking for it. Like those are things you just add those features from the beginning. The biggest other technical thing that ends up being really difficult to undo later has to do with multi-tenancy and how you're doing authentication and authorization for the users through the app and through the stack. And it's very, very common that like you end up doing the authentication authorization in the business logic of the app, maybe at the edge, and you're not even doing it in your middle tier layer. And you've got service accounts that your web front end is talking to a middle tier with a service account, and your middle tier is talking to your data layer with a service account that has access to everything. And you're fully relying on your developer's application code, maybe at the perimeter or maybe in the mid tier, to not be giving people access to more than they should and that sort of thing, to where something screws up. Like it can be possible to have the system give them somebody else's data in these multi-tenant environments. So figure out ways to have that from top to bottom, that you're looking at the scope of access for the user and the organization or the customer that they're associated with, and having those limits be built in all the way through the entire stack, so that every request between every layer has permissions that are specific to that user. That's really, really hard to go back and backport in once you've already launched and got customers on a system. And it is so like risky and fragile, because you're just asking to break things and find broken things in production following that deployment when you're validating, or worse, like the customers are opening tickets later. I think those are the biggest mistakes I see with early SaaS startups.
Yeah, it's so easy for a developer just to say, just give me everything, just because I don't want to deal with trying to troubleshoot permissions issues.
Yeah.
Right? And then a third party that we want to bring on as a vendor, and I say, okay, what kind of permissions do you need? Well, we just need, all of these admin roles. Whoa, what does it do? Oh, it just looks at calendars. Okay, so you want to be able to read, write, add people to groups. You want to be able to add users. Wait, and all your app wants to do is look at calendars? Well, it's in the code. It doesn't do all that other stuff. It just looks at the calendars, right? So it's challenging.
I do client-side auth in the client. So, in my browser, I'll just, I authenticate from the browser, and then everything's great. And then I get in and I have everything I need to do. So it's completely fine. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here. Accidental CISO, you said all they need to, one of the things that they should do is set up a CICD pipeline. That's not an easy lift, is it?
Well, it doesn't have to be complex, but having at least the foundation of that for how you're going to deploy this stuff is just it's so important, because if you got folks checking stuff into GitHub and then into your pulling out of there into a test environment or whatever, right, paying people to manually deploy those things over and over and over again, but potentially multiple times a day, I mean, that adds up fast. I mean, maybe it's only 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there to do it. And then maybe, some troubleshooting when all of a sudden some dependency is wonky or whatever, but front loading just that little bit of effort. And it's not difficult. I mean, you can, using stuff like Terraform, put together, software-defined infrastructure as code, software-defined infrastructure pretty quickly and easily, and do some, I mean, you do bash scripts. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a full, CI/CD, Circle CI or, whatever CI/CD
Jenkins
tool you want to use,
like that.
Jenkins or whatever. Like it can be really simple, but just like starting with a baseline layer of automation is really important, because then you can start iterating on that as you need to start automating testing, and then maybe adding some static code analysis tools, because once you've got that baseline in there, you can start building in those gates and maturing other parts of the program much more easily as well. So yeah, don't take pipeline to make it sound like it has to be like some final state, like
right.
Super complex thing, but saving those 5 minutes here and there, like, I mean, that really does add up across a team really, really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea. We've talked with folks in GRC before who said, if you don't have an Archer or something and using Excel spreadsheets, it's probably better than, having to find and pay $500,000 for a GRC tool. It sounds like this as well. It's like, bash scripts would work fine, or some kind of, GitHub well, maybe not GitHub Actions, but something like that where you can move that stuff around. Because if you start using something like Circle CI or Jenkins, I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news, but Jenkins has all kinds of garbage shit going on right now with their unauthed RCEs and stuff, and there's hundreds of thousands of Jenkins installations sitting around on the internet. So yeah, you've got a CICD pipeline. Yay, we just installed Jenkins, we're all good.
Right.
And then you've introduced additional risk to your org because, we didn't know we need to patch that or something. Or, the bash scripts are probably the best way to go until you get your dedicated or virtual security person like Accidental CISO here who can go, yeah, you probably shouldn't put that Jenkins on the outside with no auth on it or something like that. Yep. So that makes most baby steps, right? You don't have to be like, you don't have to have your Circle CIs or your Jenkins bash scripts work pretty damn good, I think, in many cases. So,
yep. And I think another area that very quickly, even SaaS startups that are in operations, have customers and that kind of stuff, right, don't have as the observability tooling. That's another area that very often I'm having to advocate for with clients. Like, just get your logs aggregated, and I pitch it from an operational standpoint as well, not purely security. Because while security, is able to take advantage of having all the logs aggregated, and you can start doing a lot more monitoring and alerting, from a day-to-day standpoint, taking these anecdotal reports from customers of, hey, weird thing just happened, and the team's like, I don't know, everything looks okay to me. And, if you've got the tooling in place to go actually track that pretty quickly by finding that user's transaction that went wonky and be like, oh, yeah, I totally see why that happened. The database was blocked and the transaction failed. Yeah, that was a weird thing that happened. And they can figure out then why that happened and fix that. So, right. There's so many times that having good observability tooling from an operational standpoint took weird stuff from a huge client and a really influential doctor at some major health system who was having some problem and pissed off because something wasn't working. And we were able to sort out within an afternoon instead of a day or weeks to reproduce the problem and get the bug fixed like now, instead of having this giant customer with this really vocal doctor not happy with us. Like right. There was a lot we could do there to speed up troubleshooting and making sure that everything was working properly and get ahead of issues before they became issues. Like being able to find weird, slow transactions that point to issues in the database, or maybe you need an index or something before the thing falls over. Like you can see those, and it's not just, hey, the pages are loading a little bit slow or something. You can catch that before some customers complaining about it and actually point to data to say, oh, yes, this is actually happening. It's not just your internet connection or whatever, because customers hate it when you tell them it's their internet connection.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Ms. Berlin, do we know any companies that do work with small, medium businesses on log aggregation?
I can't think of any.
Oh, well, that's a shame. We'll have to probably find some. Yeah.
I hate it when my ISP tells me it's my internet connection.
Gosh.
Does that mean that they should be fixing your internet connection?
You ever what's the in Parks and Rec, when Ron Swanson goes up, he like is in Home Depot or something, and somebody tries to walk up to him, and he's just like, "I know more than you." That's like every time you have to call Comcast or Spectrum. Like, please get me to somebody that's level 3.
Yeah. I remember it was a couple of years ago, Mr. Betcher was having some issues with his internet and he had packet loss. I seem to remember you and I talking about this on here, and you were like, look, I've run a trace route back to your cable, wiring in your rack there. I know where the loss is. You should just go out and fix this IP
Please.
or this
Not only
router.
do I know what the IP address is of the device and probably what the device is, I know the street address where the device is too. So go check it out.
Look, I'll go buy one on Amazon. You just tell me I can go and fix it, and I'll just go and wire that shit up for you, and you won't have to do it. Yeah.
I live out in the sticks on a cellular broadband. So I've been on 3G, 4G, now 5G and stuff over the years. And I've literally had times where I've had to pester AT&T to finally get escalated to somebody who will actually take me seriously and give them like this tower ID at this location has a partial outage. You can connect to it, but you can't get any data through it.
Wow.
Like it's not completely down, but it ain't working. And they don't normally want to believe it. And yeah, doing the troubleshooting for them is always fun.
I just figured like at so many years you would get a card with like, here's the person you call
I know.
Places. And then you could all talk to each other.
Was that when there was an XKC?
Slack.
There was an XKCD or something like that where it was like, oh yeah, if you say this phrase, you'll get to level 3. It's like,
Right.
chili dog barks at midnight, and it's like, oh okay, yeah, I know, you know what you're talking about, level 3. Okay, we're cool. Yeah,
I love how like Slack and these like social media communities though, like somebody's like, hey, do I know anybody at X company? And like inevitably, like somebody can get you in touch with somebody in the org that can poke the right thing internally to get action. I mean, that's one of the most amazing things professionally about, the internet and social media and things like Slack and Discord.
Yeah, that's one of the few positives about the InfoSec community as a whole. It's like, hey, do I know somebody over there? And the first thing you're like, oh shit, do they have a breach? And then the other one's like, no, I just need to talk about my internet server.
Depends on who asks. If it's like Tavis or asks, like they definitely are in a lot of trouble. But
your ass starts sweating when Tavis asks, do I know somebody over there? You're like, whoa.
No.
Yeah. Asking for a friend or asking for me. So, wow. So, accidental CISO, you've been in the industry a little bit of time, I'd imagine. Before we started, Mr. Betcher and I were talking about some things. There was a blog post that our good friend Jen had posted up on our Slack about there's been, 25, 30,000 layoffs just in January alone this year. And it seems like companies like doing that now because the layoffs mean more profits. So they're seeing a rise in stock. Now, I've said something similar about breaches, where breaches don't actually hurt companies, and they, they pay the lip service, but, they get a 10% bump in stock when they say, oh, we feel bad. Here's a year's worth of, credit monitoring you'll never use. And then, they get their 20% stock bump. From a higher, and I've got a point here. So there's a lot of folks who are still out of work, multi-month, end to end, and what have you. Is there, from prognostication point of view, do you see us getting better with regards to hiring people? Do you always see a problem with that, especially working in the healthcare space? Every IT person that gets hired is one less doctor or half a less doctor that they're going to have, and that's how they treat it. I mean, we've talked with
they don't get paid that well in healthcare IT to equal a half a doctor.
Yeah, we talked to Seattle Public Schools, and April Murdoch had said the same thing. She's like, for every IT person that I have, that's one less teacher they have. So obviously, the business requirements are we save lives, or we can't do X if we buy this thing, or this box has to be really, really important for them to want to spend that $500,000 to do whatever. Do you see hiring of IT and security people getting less or more better based on what you're seeing there in the industry right now?
I'm starting to see some hiring coming up in some of my network, like I'm starting to see people posting jobs and that kind of stuff. I'm noticing the salaries seem to be a little bit lower than they had been before. So following these layoffs, these mass layoffs, as folks are hungry and looking for work, if I feel like orgs are taking the chance to, pull down pay scales a little bit and see if they can hire folks in for a little bit less. Folks that I know that have been looking for roles who are very, very good, are really struggling still to find roles, as well. And what, like I keep hearing them say, man, this job market is just nuts right now with what organizations are looking for. Like I think we're still doing a lot of like the kitchen sink stuff where they're trying to cram too much in. I've also seen some job descriptions come up that are like kind of oddly specific, and it's like basically they're trying to replace the person who left. And you can kind of tell from the job description that like they're trying to find this unicorn that's the same shape as the person who had been there before with their unique career progression and experience, and like
probably doing
you're
3
not
jobs.
going to find that. So that's another thing that I'm noticing a little bit right now with it, but I hope it hasn't picked up much. Like it's been just crickets for months now. And there have been a few postings that I've seen that I've been able to pass on to folks that I know that have been looking for stuff. But I think we're still making the same mistakes. I'm also not seeing organizations changing job descriptions to try to focus on inclusion and diversity as well. And so that's we're going to continue to have a lot of the similar problems, at least from what I've seen in the posts that have job postings that are starting to come up, and they're less pay.
So for those folks that are more senior, where you said, hey, the job market is murder, because they know their value, right? What does it take to become a virtual CISO or a consultant CISO? Do you have to, is it a lot of networking? Is there, I worked for a consultancy firm before I worked at my current joint, and we had a virtual CISO kind of thing. And, what happened was the virtual CISOs got poached by the company they were working with, become actual CISOs. Hey, Wendy. Hi. And so is that a way to do it? I mean, it's one way to do it, or, would you recommend what you do and how you do it?
I've been kind of behind the scenes talking with folks since I started consulting and sort of helping them get their own consulting businesses going as well. Most of them as side hustles. One in particular, though, actually was, and after talking to me, he decided, I'm going to take the leap, and started. Now he had some coding chops that a lot of people don't necessarily have, and had an idea for a specific type of consulting, and he built software specifically to do that, has hired a team, and has done millions of dollars worth of sales in under a year, getting his stuff up and running. And then other folks have just been doing it as a side hustle, but it isn't super, super difficult. Like, honestly, the kind of the hard part is just getting over that hump of the risk side of it, or the perceived risk. Right. But, my perspective on that has been a single cash stream from a single employer is more risky than multiple cash streams from half a dozen, 6, 8, whatever clients. You can lose a client and it's not gonna break you. And, you can always go out and continue selling and forming relationships and that kind of stuff. So it's not as scary. Healthcare is another scary piece of it. But when you step back and really start looking at the numbers and what you're trying to achieve, trying to replicate your employer health coverage isn't necessarily the best way to go, because, the insurance marketplace, or even buying insurance direct, high deductible plans, as long as your family's relatively healthy, healthcare is not that expensive to just pay out of pocket.
Right.
Pediatrician visits for my kids end up being 80 to $100. And then family doctor visits for my wife and I is like $120. And but when you look at what you were paying and your employer was paying combined for your coverage, like most employer provided healthcare is like 15 to 20 plus grand a year just in premiums to have it. And a lot of those are becoming high deductible too. So, I mean, you got to go to the doctor an awful lot for that. And when it really comes down to it, like having a marketplace plan or whatever that caps your out of pocket maximum at, 8 or 10 grand in case somebody ends up in the hospital with something serious, like at least you're not going to go bankrupt above that. But like even my daughter going in for x-rays and stuff when she fell off the back of a golf cart when we were picking pumpkins, luckily it didn't break her arm, but like the x-ray and that kind of stuff, like it's like $300 to pay out of pocket. It wasn't as expensive as as you hear people talking about necessarily. So when you really think about total cost of coverage and a lot of prescriptions, again, as long as the family's relatively healthy, things like GoodRx and prescription programs from pharmacies can bring your cost down to where the discount through my marketplace health plan, the price for my ADHD meds is actually like $10 higher than just using the Kroger discount program that they have in-house. So instead of $35, it's like 26 or something. That's one of the things that I learned as well, because that healthcare was one of the things that kept me from making this leap for a long, long, long time. And it hasn't been as bad as I was expecting it to be once I actually really sat down and thought about like, what would we expect to use over the course of a typical year? What would that cost us? What do the premiums cost? Getting an LLC is easy.
Right.
If you have a lawyer do it, you can probably do it for like $300. You can do it yourself. Getting your federal tax ID number is free and it takes 15 minutes on the IRS website. Once you got those, you can walk down to your bank and get a bank account and put $10 in to fund it initially for your business. And now you have a business and a bank account and a way to get paid with an LLC to keep you, keep yourself separate from your business personally. Insurance isn't super, super expensive. I will say though, for consulting, you're going to want general business liability insurance.
Right.
You're going to want cyber insurance. You're going to want errors and omissions insurance in case you lead somebody in the wrong direction, that kind of thing. So like for my consulting company, my insurance ends up being about $2,000 a year. It sounds like it, but at the end of the day, like for a business that's paying me a living income, $2,000 a year for the insurance really isn't terrible. So the barriers to entry really aren't that great, and signing up for Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 to get email up, domains are cheap. All of us know how to set up email and that kind of stuff for your business. Like I'll set up Zoom or whatever you want to use for calls with clients. I mean, it's that the overhead of setting up a consulting business is really so low that one of the troubles I actually have throughout the year is finding enough deductions on things. So I've sponsored Blue Team Con, and I've sponsored Securing Sexuality, and I've sponsored Circle City Con to try to help my friends because it gave me ways to sponsor and help the community and give back, and also give me deductions for my business to help keep my tax load from being higher than it needed to be.
Yeah. And you're counting your house as your office and stuff, right? For purposes of consultancy, internet and all that, all your utilities.
Yes. Yeah. Square footage of the house is key. If you're, I've got a tax professional that's helping me with all of this, but basically, I've got to tell her how many square feet the house is and how big my office is. My wife's self-employed, so how big her studio is, as well, her art studio. And, come up with, this is what we, electric and gas and water and like all of that stuff. The internet stuff, because I'm, cyber consultant and need really reliable internet. The business pays for multiple internet connections for me because I need a primary and a backup and can't work. So that I'm not splitting with the house. Like that's just pure for the business.
Right.
And so they're that's fully covered. But yeah, it's getting it set up's not bad. And if you work your network and figure out your why, like why am I doing it? I think that was the hardest thing for me, was just figuring out what's my why? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And to come up with my niche, because you don't want to chase everything. Chasing everything that moves, you're going to waste time and energy, and you're not going to be focused. Like, you got to focus on what's my niche, what am I going to do, to the exclusion of other stuff. And so mine is assessments, policy work, process documentation, process improvement, and a light bit of advisory. Outside of that, I don't do anything else. And I really try to stay laser focused on that. And I strongly suggest anybody who's going to do this, like, figure out what your niche is and then start working your network for who knows people that need this. I'm telling you, with all the people laid off right now, those companies are going to need people to start doing this stuff again. Like, they can't just completely suspend the security programs that all those people were doing. At some point, they're going to have to circle back around and realize, like, oh crap, we got to have somebody do all of these things, or we're going to lose our SOC 2, and we're going to, or lose our high trust certification or ISO certificate, like all of these things. So the huge layoffs have opened up a huge opportunity in my mind for folks that are set up or who can get set up very quickly to step in with a business to be outsourced to.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it sounds great. I was going to ask about the malpractice insurance, but you've already covered that part. So, cool. Yeah, I was actually looking at something for the podcast here, because we used to have the nonprofit, but we don't have that anymore. So I've heard it's kind of a pain in the ass to set things up in California. So, like, Delaware's was where I was looking at for that. Some states are more friendly, Montana, Delaware, those areas that for setting up LLCs. But
you see a lot. That's why you see a lot of your junk mail from Delaware.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I know everybody needs to go. I want to spend a little time on the Mindful Security Podcast, Business Security Podcast. Sorry, I'm literally looking at it over here, so I wanted to make sure I got it right. Mindful Business Security Show, not podcast show. What was what was the why for you for setting up a show like that?
Yeah, there are so many small businesses out there that need help. Like, according to the SBA, it's like 32 million or something. And of those, 31.4 million are like 20 people or less. And there's like 15 to 16 million self-employed folks out there. Like, the numbers are staggering. There are literally not enough security pros to go around to help these folks. And those, like, self-employed folks and those 1 to 10 to 20 people businesses are completely underserved by the industry. And so I wanted to create the Mindful Business Security Show to help folks focus on the right things. Like, that's the whole basis of my consulting too, is like helping people focus on the right things. And, so the show is a call-in radio show style. Up to this point, the callers are small business owners, small business leaders that have questions about something that they're wrestling with within a topical area. So we kind of have a general topic for each show. And I've got a guest host that joins me to help answer their questions on the show. And Amanda actually joined a couple episodes ago as one of the experts answering questions on the Mindful Business Security Show.
So much fun.
Did we get written permission to do that kind of prisoner transfer? I don't remember being
contract.
told.
It's in my contract.
What contract? Oh, yeah, that's probably why. Yeah, that's where I screwed up. I need to have get written permission next time. No, that's awesome.
That was the first time I've ever been interviewed in that style. It was very fun to have just like small businesses ask questions. Like, it was really cool.
I've loved making it.
How does that work? Do you line up businesses to call in?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a pain in the ass.
Really?
Actually, I'm changing the format of the show here shortly. I've got one more episode that's the existing format with the small business leaders calling in, and then following that, we're going to do a security awareness training show where the callers are cyber pros giving their like favorite security awareness tips. But the tips I'm going to curate so that they cover the topics that a self-employed person or a very small organization would need to include in their security awareness training program so that they can listen to that episode kind of as their training program within their business. And I'm going to, following that, continue having the callers be cyber pros. And then the guest host and I will just kind of guide the conversation and that sort of thing to keep it relevant to small businesses. But what I have found, usually record the third Friday of each month, and then we release that episode the following month, the week after. So there's like a month break to give time for editing and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because I had an editor working for a while and I needed to give them time to do their thing in a reasonable manner. But finding the small business pros has been just a burden every single week. And it's like I put out calls for callers a month in advance, knowing what the topic's going to be. And it's just crickets. And 3 weeks and 2 weeks, it's still crickets. And it's not to the week of every single time. I'll maybe get a couple people that come back interested, but every single episode, it seems like we're just like skidding in sideways, last second confirming callers and questions and that kind of stuff at the very last second. And it's stressful. I don't want the show to be stressful for me because I need I need at least 2 callers to have a show. If I just have 1 caller, it's too short. I need at least 2, preferably 3 for each episode. And it's been too much effort. And I've needed to focus on billable work. At the end of the day, like I'm at capacity with billable work right now. And, to have to worry about that between calls and meetings and other stuff and going back and forth to Twitter and social media and LinkedIn and trying to find people, it just was time that I couldn't keep putting in. So hopefully the change up in the format will help a little bit, but it'll still continue to be targeted to small business owners to just, try and teach them about security and what they need to be thinking about in their business.
I know this is a bit duplicitous, but you could have had like security people call in asking questions for some, or have somebody come in masquerading as a small business owner, like, this here's Joe Bob's Billy Tackle and Bait Shop, of which I am CEO. And, ask questions like that, I could always come on and be Joe Bob Billy's Bait Shop and Tackle, CEO, Esquire. And, just, I find it interesting. I understand there's a trust
genuine.
thing there.
Like I want it
there's
to be
a trust
authentic.
thing.
And also the angle that a small business owner is going to have, the place that they're coming from asking the question is going to be different than a cyber pro posing as a small business leader or a small business owner a lot of times. And just their thought process and their prioritization, what they're trying to weigh in their mind. And without at least a bunch of coaching from me, I'm not sure I could get it to be what I truly still want it to be as valuable and relevant for the listeners.
Well, maybe Miss Berlin, when she goes to CementCon out here in Las Vegas, she'll be able to, or what is BrickCon? It was something. I forget.
Already went.
Oh, you already went? How was
so
BrickCon?
Yeah. So it was a World of Concrete.
World of Concrete.
Like, not change of topics because I'll get to the SMB part in a second. How really, really big conferences have like huge vendors in the middle. They have like the prime spots and huge layout. And if anybody's ever been to like RSA or Black Hat or any of the really big ones, that's how like the vendor hall is set up, or any other trade show.
Right.
And this was not that different as far as that was concerned. They take up the entire convention center. So like huge area. And there's tractors and all this kind of equipment and everything. But around the edges and the backs are all like the 10 by 10 booths, right? Where all the startups and all the small businesses and all of those people are. We tried to like talk to some of the bigger companies because like, even with what we do, we don't necessarily care if it's a small to medium business or not necessarily, because a lot of, especially in construction, their amount of like knowledge workers is probably small, right? It's like their office or whatever. manufacturing floor, that kind of stuff. But nobody wanted to talk to me. So
Oh,
I went to
that's a
all of
shame.
the, well, that's why I went to all of the SMBs in the back with the 10 by 10s because one, they don't get as much traffic and
Right.
they're both. So like you go and you start handing them stickers and they're very excited to talk to you. And then their second question was usually, why are you here?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're like, I'm not in cyber. I mean, I'm not in concrete. I'm in cybersecurity. So it was actually really cool because I got to talk to like founders of like HR companies for concrete and
Oh, okay.
like these other like small manufacturing shops. It was really cool to like go to another industry trade show because that's where all the small businesses were.
It's interesting. You were trying to sell to the people trying to sell. So it's like,
I warned them. I'm like, this is a little bit of reverse marketing because they always would try and give me something. I'm like, no, I don't want that. But do you want a sticker?
Nice. Well, nobody ever gives the salespeople at those booths anything.
I know.
So yeah,
I know.
You're hooking them up there. So, so I do want to get back to the mindful business stuff. Sorry, Mr. Betcher, question, comment, concern?
Nope.
Oh, okay. We've posted the link to the Mindful Business Security show. I'm making sure I get it right.
It's a mouthful. I've had to practice it.
No. It's all good. It's all good. We used to be called breaking down security.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, we used to be called breaking down security until I realized people don't get it. So we just call ourselves kind of BreakSec now. So, but yeah, world of concrete. Anyway, so you've been doing this for a few years. You're going to continue doing it. It's awesome that you're able to do that. At some point, my invite hopefully will end up in the mail, and we'll be able to get on. And Mr. Betcher will be able to join you at some point too. He's got IR and stuff to definitely talk about from that point of view. But so. Go check that out if you are watching the stream right now. Go check out the audio show, and we'll, let us know what you think. Post up a review on Apple or iTunes or any one of the other. Wow, holy crap! You got a lot of things on there, don't you? You're on Apple, you're on Amazon Music, you're on Audible, you're on.
Should be about everywhere.
Samsung. Well, I heard Google Podcasts is going away, so it's going to be YouTube Music at some point. But cool. Stitcher, you're on Spotify. Yeah, you're everywhere. So yeah, go check out the Mindful Business Security Show. So, Accidental CISO, any last thoughts before you go?
Man, no, this has been a lot of fun and a great conversation, and appreciate you guys having me on.
Okay, cool. And I hope. Because I've more than offered to give this audio to you if you want to host it up on your side too. That way you've got, you don't have to put out so many shows, some unbillable hours. This is unbillable hours, unfortunately. We did not pay you to be here. I apologize. So, we'll give you the audio. Yeah. So
I'm doing this for free.
Yeah, I actually was asked the other day, hey, I only come on shows when I get paid. And I was like, okay. And so I filled out the form. And I haven't heard back yet because I don't think I did very good. But it's the first time I've ever entertained bringing somebody on we have to pay to come on, and no response. So I must have either lowballed them or they're not taking me seriously. But
I give you $5 and a hug.
Aw.
But you have to come to Ohio to get it.
Oh. Well, you're coming to San Diego in June, so we'll have lunch.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Cool. All right. Accidental CISO, how do people find you on the internet?
Best way is probably Twitter. I am still active there. Also on Mastodon on the InfoSec Exchange instance. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I've got the handle on other sites kind of reserved, but I don't use Instagram or anything like that. So.
Okay. All right. So yeah, very cool. Miss Berlin, how would they find you on the internets?
I'm a little bit more active on Mastodon and Twitter lately.
How come?
So, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know. I just started generating a little bit more content. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got to go somewhere, right? We have to build something. It's just everything's got fragmented between Threads and Blue Sky and Masto and the people who stuck around on Twitter. So
if I want a longer post, I'll do those on LinkedIn, and I have some shorter ones too.
LinkedIn. Yep. Cool. Okay, so LinkedIn, InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Amanda Berlin elsewhere. So yeah. Mr. Betcher, how'd they find you on the socials? Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes. Cool. Also in the show notes. What does it say there? Let me see.
I don't believe you are on Twitter so much anymore, but Betcher Pwned is your Twitter handle. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, you can find me at Brian Brake on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. It's in the show notes if you want to go there. Our website is breakingsecurity.com, BRAKEING security.com. Our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@BreakSecEd. So, and then, you can join us on Twitch at BreakSec, BRAKESEC, twitch.tv/BreakSec. So thanks to everybody who stuck around, Age of Music, all of our friends, Beta Wolf, and everybody who stuck around on the Slack and on the Twitch here. And thanks to Accidental CISO for taking your unbillable hours and giving them to us for a little bit. We definitely appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back on, in a billable capacity at some point.
Well, that'd be cool.
Right on. Cool. Well, that was it for our show this week. We'll be back in a couple weeks. I believe Ms. Bat, cross fingers, is going to be joining us talking about some hiring and career stuff. So we'll definitely be talking more about that with her. And so, hope everyone has a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves, because we're fond of saying here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.